My name is Ava Hartley, 23 years old, and on most Friday nights, while people my age are out living their lives, I'm balancing 4 boxes of pizza under a broken umbrella soaked to the skin and running on 5 hours of sleep from 2 jobs. My hands still sting from opening the cafe at dawn. My car rattles when I turn left, and somewhere across town, my brother Logan is probably cruising in his new company car, paid for by the same parents who once handed me a bus schedule for my 16th birthday. Our family always had two sets of rules, one paved with excuses, the other with silence. I thought that was just the way life would be, until the night someone I hadn't seen in years stood under a street lamp and said my name. Before I tell you how that moment changed everything, tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own family? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, hit subscribe. You're not alone. I grew up on a quiet, tree-lined street in Eugene, Oregon. Our house had 4 bedrooms, a freshly cut lawn, and a white mailbox with our family name, the Hartleys, painted neatly across the front. From the outside, we looked like the blueprint of the American dream. My dad, Thomas, was a regional manager for a local insurance company. My mom, Carol, gave piano lessons from our living room, always smiling at the kids she taught but rarely looking directly at me. To anyone passing by, we were a well-functioning middle-class family. And in many ways we were. We never worried about bills. The fridge was always full. Christmas came with presents under the tree, and birthday candles never missed their mark. But what people couldn't see, what was harder to explain, was the quiet way love was rationed, and how most of it went to my brother Logan. The signs weren't loud at first. They were subtle, quiet dismissals dressed up as excuses. When I was 7, I painted a watercolor portrait of our family for my school's art fair. I spent the entire weekend bent over it, tongue poking out, fingers smudged with color. When I won second place, my teacher handed me the certificate with a proud smile. But my parents never showed. Logan had a little league game that day. Later, I found my award tucked in a kitchen drawer, yellowing at the edges. Meanwhile, the fireplace mantel was lined with every one of Logan's trophies, even the ones that simply said, "Participant." My mom noticed me looking at them once and said gently, "Sweetheart, we just have to support your brother. Boys need more encouragement these days." At 12, the differences became impossible to ignore. Logan's birthday parties were extravagant bounce houses, magicians' custom cakes shaped like footballs. Mine were last-minute dinners at chain restaurants. I remember asking once why we didn't do anything big for me. My dad just smiled and said, "You're the independent one, Ava. You don't need all that." At the time, I believed them. I had to. I wore independence like a badge of honor, not realizing it was also a form of neglect. I started babysitting at 13, saving every dollar. Logan, on the other hand, got a weekly allowance for simply existing. I asked for art classes once, nothing fancy, just a weekend program at the community center. My parents said it was too expensive. That same week, Logan came home with a new pair of hockey skates and a registration packet for a private training camp. Still, I didn't fight. I swallowed it. All of it. And told myself it was just how things were. That if I worked hard enough, if I stayed quiet enough, maybe someday things would even out. But that day didn't come. This was just the beginning. A quiet erosion. Not of money, but of mattering. And back then I had no idea how deep it would go, or how much it would shape the woman I'd become. Let me ask you, did you ever grow up feeling like the supporting character in your own family? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. By the time I turned 16, I had already learned how to disappear quietly. Not in the literal sense. Of course, I still came home after school, still did the dishes, still smiled in family photos. But somewhere between 12 and 16, I stopped asking for things. I stopped expecting anything special, because every time I did, the answer was the same. "We're tight this month, Ava." Or, "Logan has a game that weekend, sweetie." Or worse, "You don't need that, you're not like him." And I wasn't. Logan was loud, confident, and messy in a charming kind of way. He took up space in every room he walked into. I, on the other hand, had learned to shrink, to make myself smaller, to say thank you even when I felt forgotten. That year, our 16th birthdays became the clearest mirror of our family's imbalance. Logan's birthday came in March. My parents blindfolded him in the driveway and surprised him with a used but shiny silver Honda Civic. The look on his face was pure joy, and my dad stood beside him like he'd just handed over the keys to manhood itself. There were cheers photos, even a backyard barbecue that evening to celebrate. 6 months later, on my own 16th birthday, I sat at the kitchen table expecting not a car. I wasn't that naive. But maybe a gift, a dinner, something to make it feel like my day. My dad handed me a folded brochure and a printed bus schedule. "This is a list of local job openings," he said, as if it were a present. "Time to start learning responsibility, Ava. You'll appreciate your first car more if you earn it yourself." I nodded. And for the next 2 years, I did exactly that. I worked every weekend shift I could get, babysitting, bagging groceries, waiting tables. I walked dogs for elderly neighbors and sold my paintings at the Saturday market for whatever someone was willing to pay. Every dollar went into a jar labeled Toyota Fund. By senior year, I had saved just enough to buy a 15-year-old Corolla with peeling paint, no air conditioning, and brakes that made a sound I learned to ignore. But it was mine. Every squeaky turn of that steering wheel belonged to me. Logan, meanwhile, dented his Civic backing out of a friend's driveway after a party. Our parents paid for the repairs the same week, no questions, no lecture. I tried not to let it break me, but every moment like that it chipped away at something. Not just my sense of fairness, my sense of belonging. I told myself stories to survive it. Maybe I'm just more mature. Maybe they're harder on me because they think I can handle it. Maybe one day, they'll see all the sacrifices I've made. I clung to the belief that college would be my reset button. I could leave Eugene, study graphic design, and start over in a world that finally saw me. I worked hard, really hard, held a part-time job throughout high school, maintained a 3.9 GPA, joined every free extracurricular I could find, debate club, yearbook, design contests, anything that looked good on a college application and didn't cost money. My dream was to attend Parsons School of Design in New York. I applied with a carefully crafted portfolio and a letter that bled hope between every typed line. And then something remarkable happened. I got in. Not only that, but they offered me a partial scholarship, enough to get my foot in the door. The rest I'd cover with student loans, work study, and the savings I had left. I still remember sitting at the kitchen table, letter in hand, heart in my throat, telling my parents. My mom blinked. "That's amazing, Ava." My dad looked uncomfortable. "The thing is, your college fund was redirected." "Redirected," I echoed, my voice suddenly thin. "Logan's startup," he explained. "His craft beer app. We used the savings to help him get it off the ground." I stared at them, speechless. "It's an investment," he continued. "Like that made it better. With your grades, you'll get loans. You'll be fine." That night, I sat in my room holding the acceptance letter in one hand and a bank statement in the other. All those years I was told they were saving for both of us. All of it had gone to my brother. Again. This time, though, something shifted. It didn't feel like sadness anymore. It felt like fuel. The kind that burns slow and steady until one day it ignites something you can't put out. And as I lay there in the dark, I promised myself one thing. If no one was going to believe in me, I'd learn to believe in myself, loudly, even if I had to start from nothing, even if it meant clawing my way up from the basement of someone else's spotlight. Have you ever felt like you had to work twice as hard just to be seen? Drop a comment and tell me. You're not alone. By the fall of my sophomore year, college no longer felt like a place to grow, it felt like a battlefield I crossed on borrowed strength. I was attending the State University in Corvallis, Oregon, not my dream school in New York, not even my second choice. But it was the only place I could afford after the craft beer app that swallowed my college fund quietly failed, just like every other idea Logan had chased. I worked 30 hours a week, took a full course load, and still somehow kept my grades above a 3.5. Some nights I studied until sunrise, head on the desk, waking up to the buzz of my morning alarm still clutched in my hand. My roommates talked about parties and weekend hikes. I talked to debt collectors and tutoring clients, but I smiled through it because I still believed in the story I was telling myself. If I just kept working hard enough someday, someone would see me. Then came Thanksgiving. It was supposed to be a break, a weekend to catch my breath and eat a real meal for once. I arrived home late Wednesday night, textbooks still in my bag because I knew I'd be studying through the holiday. Thursday afternoon, I sat at the dinner table with my parents and Logan. Everything looked perfect, the roasted turkey, the mashed potatoes, the candles flickering just right. But beneath the surface, something inside me felt tight, like a thread pulled too far. We were passing around side dishes when my dad said it casual as anything. "We're helping Logan lease a new office space." My fork paused mid-air. For the business, I asked, careful to keep my voice neutral. Logan beamed. "Yeah, the pet box idea. Subscription stuff for dog owners. This one's gonna take off." I stared at him. The last business had failed. The one before that, too. And still here they were, backing him like it was the first time all over again. I forced myself to breathe. "I'm glad things are working out," I said slowly. "But I'm struggling to pay for textbooks next semester, even with my 2 jobs." My mom reached across the table, gently patted my hand. "Maybe it would be wise to take a semester off. Save up a bit." Her voice was kind. Her smile is soft. But the message hit like a slap. Take a break. Wait your turn. Logan gets to dream. You get to pause. I looked around the table. My brother's confident grin, my father's proud gaze directed only at him, and my mother's dismissive comfort delivered with the same sweetness she used on her piano students. Something in me broke, not loudly, not with fireworks, but like glass cracking under pressure, quiet, final, impossible to undo. That weekend I packed my things. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a scene. I just moved into a tiny studio apartment near campus, with a roommate I barely knew, and made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I would no longer ask for space at a table where I was only ever a guest. At 19, I began living entirely on my own terms. No financial support, no family safety net. Just me, my student debt, and the will to never depend on anyone who made me feel like I wasn't enough. The studio was cramped with a leaky faucet and paper-thin walls, but it was mine. I learned to stretch a $20 grocery budget for a full week. I learned that peanut butter goes with almost anything. I learned that self-respect is sometimes the only pillow you have to sleep on. And I learned that independence once forced upon me could become my greatest strength if I chose it on my own. That Thanksgiving dinner wasn't the first time I felt invisible, but it was the last time I accepted it. Sometimes the moment that breaks you is the same moment that sets you free. Have you ever walked away from something or someone that made you feel small? Share it below. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. Independence sounds noble when you say it out loud. It looks strong on paper, empowering even. But in real life, independence is cold. It's cracked hands. It's an empty fridge and counting every dollar before you swipe your card. It's learning to carry your exhaustion like it's part of your skin. My studio apartment was on the 4th floor of a building optimistically described online as up and coming. What that really meant was broken elevators, flickering hallway lights, and neighbors who argued so loudly at night I sometimes had to sleep with headphones on just to block out the shouting. When I moved in, the elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to the door. 8 months later, the sign was still there. Every single day I climbed 4 flights of stairs balancing groceries or laundry, or a backpack that felt heavier than it should have. My alarm went off at 4:30 every morning. By 5:15, I was tying my apron behind the counter at Maple Brew Cafe, a locally owned coffee shop 2 blocks from campus. I'd been working there since my freshman year, mostly on the early shifts before class. The kind where the sky is still dark and your breath turns white in the air. The work wasn't glamorous. Grinding beans, stocking pastries, wiping sticky counters before the doors even opened. But the tips were decent, and the regulars were kind. Over time, I came to rely on those quiet moments, the smell of fresh espresso, the sound of milk steaming, the predictable rhythm of something I could control. "Girl, you look like you slept standing up," Sky said one morning, raising an eyebrow as I stifled my third yawn before sunrise. Sky had been my coworker and my closest friend for over a year. Purple hair, 10 piercings, and the sharpest intuition I've ever known. "Bold of you to assume I slept at all," I mumbled, pouring oat milk into a cup without even looking. She didn't laugh, just handed me a protein bar from her bag and said, "Here, you need this more than I do." That was the thing about Sky. She never asked questions I wasn't ready to answer, but she always saw the truth anyway. I finished my shift at 1:30 p.m., ran home, changed uniforms, and started my second job delivering pizzas for Tony's Pizza Shack by 3. 5 nights a week, I drove across the city in a 15-year-old Corolla with a passenger door that didn't open and a stereo that only played static. By the time midnight rolled around, I was too tired to think. My body ached from the hours, the stairs, and the weather. My hands were dry and cracked from dish soap and steering wheels. I kept lotion in the glove box and applied it at red lights, hoping the skin wouldn't split before the week was out. I wasn't living, I was surviving. My budget allowed me exactly $43 of wiggle room per month. That's all I had left after rent, utilities, groceries, gas insurance, and student loan payments. One flat tire, one urgent care visit, one missed shift, and it would all fall apart. I kept going because I had no other choice. My mother still called once a week, but the calls were always the same. 10 minutes about Logan, his new office space, his meeting with investors, his dreams of making it big. Then a polite, "How are things with you, Ava?" Just enough to pretend she cared, never enough to actually know. I told her about the freelance design projects I'd been doing between shifts, small jobs for local businesses, logos, flyers, a few branding packages. I thought maybe she'd be proud. "That's nice, dear," she said. "It's good to have hobbies." Hobbies. That word clung to me like an insult in disguise. What I saw as survival, what I hoped could one day become my real career, was reduced to something to fill time, something light, something optional. I didn't say what I really felt, that I was slowly building something for myself, quietly, in the background, that I was tired of being treated like someone who had no direction just because I wasn't failing out loud like Logan. I just nodded, even though she couldn't see it over the phone. And that was how it went. I kept my head down. I worked. I studied. I designed in the hours when the world was asleep. Because somewhere in me, there was still a flicker of belief. That one day, some part of this would pay off. That if I just kept going, something would finally see me. But what I didn't know then was that help wasn't coming from where I expected. It would arrive soaked in rain, wrapped in silence, and disguised as a voice from my past. And that moment would change everything. Have you ever worked yourself to the edge and felt like no one noticed? Tell me. Your story matters here. It was a Friday night in late October, the kind where the wind cuts straight through your jacket and the rain feels personal. I had already spilled coffee on myself at Maple Brew, forgotten my lunch at home, and delivered 3 separate pizza orders without tips. My car's check engine light had started blinking halfway through the shift, and every time I turned left, the engine made a noise like it was clearing its throat to quit. By 8:00 p.m., I was running on caffeine and stubbornness. I pulled into the driveway of a house that looked like it had been plucked from a catalog. Manicured lawn, decorative lanterns lined the stone path. Behind the windows, I could see party lights flashing and hear music that made the ground vibrate beneath my shoes. 4 extra-large pizzas barely balanced under a soggy umbrella. My sneakers were soaked. My socks squelched with every step. I rang the bell. A guy in his 20s answered, baseball cap on backwards, red plastic cup in hand. His grin widened when he saw me dripping and miserable. "Pizza's here!" he yelled over his shoulder, laughter erupting from somewhere behind him. How much, he asked, already fumbling for his wallet. $78.50, I replied, forcing my customer service voice through clenched teeth. He dropped some bills, chuckled, and handed me $80. "Keep the change," he slurred. $1.50, for 4 pizzas in a downpour. I bit my tongue, said thank you, turned to leave. Behind me, someone called out, "Don't forget to make her wait in the rain while we find the paper plates." The door slammed shut. Laughter trailed behind it. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the boxes gone, but something heavier settling on my chest. The rain soaked through my cap, trickled down the back of my neck. I walked to my car, opened the door, sat behind the wheel and stared at the windshield where the wipers smeared water into streaks I couldn't see through. Then I heard it. Ava. Ava Hartley. The voice cut through the storm. I turned. There, under a large black umbrella, stood a man I hadn't seen in almost a decade. He stepped into the light and I froze. "Uncle Daniel," I whispered. He looked older, more gray, more lines around the eyes, but the face was unmistakable. "My father's brother, the man who vanished from our family when I was 14. He took a step closer and extended the umbrella over both of us. "What are you doing here?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "You're delivering pizzas." I blinked, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I must have looked. Hair plastered to my face, hoodie clinging to my arms. Shoes are making that awful wet squeak. "It's my second job," I said softly. "Helps pay the bills." He was quiet for a moment, then gestured back toward the house. "My company sponsored the charity event tonight. I stepped out for air and saw you walking up. I almost didn't believe it was you. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything." "You're soaked," he said gently. "What time does your shift end?" This was my last delivery. "So, now." He hesitated, then asked, "Would you consider grabbing coffee? There's a 24-hour diner about 10 minutes from here. I'd really like to catch up." Every instinct in me told me to say no. He had vanished. No explanations, no calls, just disappeared from our family like he had never existed. And yet, here he was, in the rain, looking at me like I wasn't invisible. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said. "Dad doesn't exactly speak highly of you." A flicker of pain passed through his eyes. "I'm sure he doesn't. But Ava, I'm not here to dig up old family drama. I saw you tonight and I couldn't walk away. Not like this." I studied his face, the warmth, the concern, the sincerity. 1 hour, I told myself. 1 cup of coffee in a warm booth sounded better than anything I had planned. "All right," I said. "Let me call my boss." 30 minutes later, I sat across from Daniel in a vinyl booth at the Starlight Diner, a mug of hot chocolate warming my hands. I was wrapped in a dry sweater he had in the back of his car. My hair was still damp, but the warmth of the diner made everything feel a little less sharp. He smiled at me across the table. "Last I heard, you were headed for art school," he said. I looked down, then back up. And for the first time in years, I told someone everything. The college fund that disappeared, the jobs, the apartment, the debt, the exhaustion. Daniel didn't interrupt, didn't pity, just listened. And somewhere between the story and the silence, I felt something shift, because for the first time, someone was actually listening. Have you ever had a moment where a forgotten face reappeared right when you needed it most? Tell me in the comments, because sometimes the people we least expect are the ones who see us the clearest. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions, one of those places frozen in time with sticky menus and cracked vinyl booths. But that night, it felt like a sanctuary. Daniel sat across from me, turning his coffee cup slowly in his hands while I spoke. I didn't mean to tell him everything, but once I started, it all came pouring out. The night shifts, the loans, the freelance work I barely had time for. The way every win I scraped together was followed by silence from my family, or worse, condescension. He never interrupted, just listened. Not with pity, but with a kind of quiet attention I wasn't used to. When I finished, I looked down at my hands wrapped around the mug. They were red from the cold and dishwater, rough in ways they shouldn't have been at 20. He sat back and exhaled. "Ava," he said quietly, "you shouldn't be living like this. Not with your talent." I looked up sharply. "I'm not looking for charity." "Good," he replied, not missing a beat. "Because I don't offer charity. I invest in people I believe in." There was a pause. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a business card. White, minimal, clean type. Horizon Works. Technologies. Daniel Hartley, founder and CEO. He slid it across the table. "We have a design department. Small but growing. They're always looking for fresh perspectives. If you're interested, I can arrange a meeting. Not a job and interview. The rest would be up to you." I stared at the card. Suspicion and hope warred inside me. "Because I'm your niece." He met my gaze evenly. "Because from what I remember, you're good. And from what I heard tonight, you're also resilient, responsible, and hardworking. That's not something you fake. But to be clear, being my niece might get you through the door. It won't keep you in the room. Not at my company." I picked up the card, feeling the weight of it between my fingers. It felt heavier than paper, like a chance. A door, maybe. One that wasn't supposed to open for someone like me. "I'll think about it," I said. "That's all I ask," he replied, then glanced at his watch. "It's late. You should get home and get dry." As we walked out to our cars, Daniel placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Whatever you decide, Ava, you can call me. It's been too long. Let's not go another 8 years." I nodded. My throat was too tight to answer. That night back in my apartment, I didn't sleep much. I left the card on my nightstand, the soft glow from the streetlight casting a pale outline across it. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to reject anything tied to the family that had ignored me for so long. But another part, quieter, older, tired, whispered something different. What if this wasn't about them? What if this were about me? 3 days passed before I found the courage to call. During those days, I researched everything I could about Horizon Works. Their design team, their values, their leadership. They weren't some shady tech firm coasting on buzzwords. They were real, respected, focused on ethical innovation, clean design, and user experience. When Daniel's assistant answered, she transferred me immediately. "I was hoping I'd hear from you," he said. "I'm interested," I told him, "in the interview. But I have conditions. I'm listening. If I get this opportunity, it has to be because I earned it. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no nepotism." He chuckled. "You really are nothing like your brother." I didn't respond. "All right," he continued. "Come by the downtown office tomorrow at 10. Bring your portfolio. You'll meet with Lauren Yates, our design director. She's thorough. And just so you know, she'll know you're my niece. But trust me, that won't help you. If anything, she'll expect more." It wasn't comforting, but it was exactly what I'd asked for. That night I stayed up till 200 a.m., pulling together my best work. Flyers I'd made for local yoga studios, logos for a campus bakery, color schemes, typography UX sketches, anything that showed I had more than survival skills, that I had vision. The next morning, I stood in front of a glass-paneled skyscraper that shimmered in the sun like something out of someone else's life. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt like something was about to begin, and I was ready. Have you ever been offered something that scared you because it felt too good to be true? Tell me, because sometimes the hardest part isn't the work. It's believing you might actually deserve the door that finally opens. The lobby of Horizon Works didn't look like any office I'd ever stepped into. Natural wood floors, a living green wall by the elevator, clean glass panels etched with the company's minimalist logo. It was quiet, sleek, confident in a way that didn't feel loud or showy. I clutched my portfolio case like a lifeline. My palms were sweating. My throat is dry. I'd spent the entire night rehearsing answers to imaginary questions, but standing there, I felt like a visitor in someone else's dream. The receptionist smiled and pointed me toward the 24th floor. Daniel met me at the elevator. Tailored navy suit, calm energy. He looked like he belonged here, like the building itself might lean in when he spoke. As we walked, he greeted several people by name. He didn't introduce me, didn't offer explanations. It was subtle, but it told me something important. He was giving me space to stand on my own. We stopped outside a glass-walled room. Inside sat a woman with a sleek bob, rectangular glasses, and a tablet in hand. "Lauren Yates," Daniel said, keeping his voice low. "She's our design director. You'll have an informational meeting. She doesn't know you're here for an interview. Just talk about your work. Be honest. Be you." That distinction, informational, not interview, seemed important to him, like he was trying to protect something fragile. Maybe my confidence, maybe his own trust in how this would play out. I stepped inside. Lauren looked up. Her eyes are sharp. Her tone was measured. "So," she said after I introduced myself, "you're Thomas Hartley's daughter." No warmth, no judgment, just a fact. "Yes," I replied. "But I'm here based on my own merit." Her eyebrow lifted. "Barely. But enough. We'll see." For the next hour, she went through my portfolio with precision, asking questions that weren't cruel but never soft. "What inspired this color palette? Why did you prioritize this typeface? Do you always design with mobile responsiveness in mind?" I answered everything, sometimes with confidence, sometimes with hesitation, but I never pretended to know more than I did. She stopped at a branding concept I'd done for a local bakery, hand-drawn elements, soft earth tones, and an emphasis on warmth. "This one shows promise," she said quietly. "There's personality here." Those 5 words meant more to me than any compliment I'd ever received. When she finally closed my portfolio, she leaned back and said, "We have a paid internship. It lasts 3 months. You'd be working on real projects, not coffee runs. And if it goes well, it could lead to something more permanent." I tried to keep my face still, but I could feel the heat behind my eyes. "Raymond wants me to hire you outright," she added. "But I don't work like that. I wouldn't want you to," I replied. She studied me for a long second, then nodded once. "The internship starts Monday. 9 to 5, business casual. Can you manage that with your other jobs?" My heart dropped. I hadn't thought that far. My coffee shop shifts, the pizza deliveries, they were what kept my lights on. "I'll make it work," I said, even though I didn't know how yet. She handed me a folder. Fill these out before you leave. Then her voice softened just a little. Your work shows talent, but it needs direction. That's what we offer here. Whether you rise to it, that's up to you. When I stepped out of the room, Daniel was waiting by the elevator. His posture relaxed, but his eyes were searching. Well, I start Monday, I said, unable to stop the smile. As an intern. He grinned. Lauren doesn't believe in shortcuts. That's actually a good sign. Then he grew serious. Will you be okay financially? I didn't lie. Barely. But I'll figure it out. That afternoon, I had two hard conversations. I asked my coffee shop manager if I could keep just the weekend shifts. She nodded slowly, then smiled. You're too valuable to lose completely. And it sounds like this is a big step for you. I quit the pizza job that evening. It felt terrifying, like jumping off a moving train with no idea where I'd land. But it also felt like relief, like finally choosing to walk rather than run myself into the ground. Have you ever said yes to something before you were sure you could handle it? I did. And I'm glad I did. Because sometimes the doors that scare us the most are the ones that lead us back to ourselves. The first day at Horizon Works felt like stepping onto a different planet. Natural light streamed through the open concept workspace. Every desk had a second monitor. There were indoor plants, real ones, not plastic. People moved with quiet focus, confident, polished, collected. And then there was I. My thrifted blazer, my scuffed flats, a second-hand laptop tucked into a borrowed tote bag. I felt like an imposter holding someone else's invitation. But then Lauren met me by the elevators. She didn't smile. She didn't sugarcoat. She handed me a welcome packet and said, "Let's get to work." And we did. For the first few weeks, I shadowed every designer in the department, sat in on client calls, took notes during brand reviews. I didn't lead. I watched. I listened. I stayed late every night reviewing design systems and typography rules and UX best practices. Lauren wasn't warm, but she was fair. When I missed the mark, she told me. When I got something right, she told me that too once and without fanfare. Her feedback didn't sting the way my parents' indifference used to, because it wasn't meant to dismiss. It was meant to make me better. And it did. Slowly, I stopped feeling like an outsider pretending, and started becoming someone who belonged. Meanwhile, Daniel kept his distance at work. He didn't hover. He didn't check in daily. But every now and then a coffee would appear at my desk. Or he'd send an article about a design trend he thought I'd like. It was subtle, quiet, but it meant something. Because someone saw me not as a daughter, not as a shadow, but as a designer in progress. 2 weeks into the internship, I got my first real assignment. Social media graphics for a product launch. Not glamorous, not high stakes, but it was mine. Seeing my work published under the Horizon Works name felt surreal. For the first time, my creativity didn't live on a dusty hard drive or the back of a napkin. It lived on a platform, a brand, a team. When my first paycheck came, I opened the envelope in silence. It wasn't a fortune, but it covered rent. Without panic, it kept the lights on. Without a calculator. I cried. Right there in the stairwell. Not because of the number, but because for once, survival didn't feel like a gamble. I moved into a slightly better apartment the next month. Nothing fancy. But the elevator worked, and the water heater didn't pick and choose its days. I called my parents to share the news. My mom's response was a strained pause. Then, an internship. At your age, shouldn't you be looking for a real job by now? Before I could answer, my dad cut in. Raymond's company, huh? So that's his game, using you to get back at me. And just like that, the air left my lungs. This isn't about you, I said, voice steady. This is about me. For once. Their silence was louder than any argument. Even Logan got in a dig a week later at a rare family dinner I forced myself to attend. Must be nice having connections, he said, swirling pasta. Some of us have to make it on our own merit. The irony was so thick I nearly choked. But I didn't say a word. Because for the first time in my adult life, their opinions didn't hold the same power. I had earned my place, and no one could take that from me. 3 months into the internship, I was no longer watching. I was leading. Small projects, real deadlines, actual clients. And I wasn't drowning. I was swimming. Sky from the cafe noticed the difference the next time I stopped in on a Saturday shift. You seem different, she said, handing me my usual. More grounded. I nodded. I feel different, like I'm finally moving forward, instead of just treading water. Because that's what happens when you stop begging for space and start building your own table. Have you ever tasted just enough success to realize you belong in the room you once feared? That's where I was standing, not at the finish line, but finally, at the starting gate. It happened on a Thursday. My calendar had a yellow star next to that day, my first full paycheck from Horizon Works as a contract designer. Not an intern, not temporary, but actual official employment. The number wasn't jaw-dropping, but it was mine. After rent, after student loans, after groceries, there was money left. Real money. Not gas station coffee money. Not maybe this'll stretch if I skip lunch money. Enough to breathe. So that night I did something I hadn't done in years. I took myself out to dinner. A quiet downtown bistro with real linen napkins and soft jazz playing overhead. I ordered a proper meal, starter main and yes, chocolate mousse for dessert. It felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I'd once dreamed of before my college fund disappeared into Logan's failed apps. I was savoring the last bite when I heard it. Ava. I looked up. Logan. Of all people. Standing at my table with a woman I didn't recognize, and that same easy grin he always wore when he wanted something. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. Is this your celebration dinner? I nodded. Just got hired full-time at Horizon Works. Good for you, he said, though his eyes flicked toward the wine glass like it bothered him. His date excused herself, leaving us alone. He leaned forward. Look, I didn't want to do this here, but things aren't good. I froze. Things, I asked cautiously. The business tanked, he said. Investors pulled out. Hard. Mom and Dad. They're in trouble, Ava. Like serious trouble. I felt my stomach drop. How bad? He sighed. Second mortgage, retirement accounts, all of it gone. They won't tell you because they're proud, but they're months away from losing the house. I stared at him. The house I grew up in. The fireplace with his trophies. The drawer where my art certificate collected dust. I went home that night and didn't sleep. My heart was loud in my chest. And for once it wasn't about me. It was about the people who had spent years investing in failure, and now had nothing left. The next morning I drove out to the house. It looked the same, but different. The lawn hadn't been mowed. The flower beds were brown. And the car my father once waxed every Saturday was missing. My mother answered the door in a faded sweatshirt. Her hair pulled back, her smile tight. This is unexpected, she said, trying to tidy as she spoke. Your father's at the store. Would you like some tea? Inside, the thermostat was low. Too low. And unopened bills sat in a stack by the door. Mom, I said softly. Logan told me. She froze. Her hands stopped moving. For a second I thought she might lie, but instead, her shoulders dropped. We didn't want you to know, she whispered. Why pride, she said. Shame. Guilt. She sat on the edge of the couch. For the first time in my life, I saw her not as my mother, but as a woman unraveling under the weight of choices she couldn't undo. She told me everything. My father's salary was cut nearly a year ago. Instead of downsizing, they cashed out their retirement. Then came Logan's latest startup, another sure thing. They believed in him, she said. They always had. And they had risked everything. Again. Just like they had with my college fund. How much, I asked. Her voice cracked. Nearly 400,000. By the time my father came home, the room was heavy with truth. He saw me, saw the open bills, knew immediately what had happened. Ethan had no right to tell you, he snapped. I'm your daughter, I replied. I had every right to know. He dropped the grocery store brand everything and sat down. For a moment he looked small. Then my mother did something I didn't expect. She spoke up. I enabled this, she said, voice steady. I let you favor Logan. I kept quiet. I helped create this. And I'm done pretending it was okay. She turned to me. Her eyes were wet but clear. When you were born, your father expected a son. He never said it outright. But I saw the disappointment. And I spent 23 years trying to cover that silence with overcompensation for your brother. My father looked stunned. That's not true, he said. But his voice lacked weight. It is, she replied. And it's time we stop lying about it. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. And in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about money. This was about finally painfully confronting the truth, not just of what they had done, but of who they had chosen to be. Have you ever uncovered a truth so deep it shifted everything you thought you knew? Sometimes clarity doesn't come as a spark, it comes as a collapse. And standing in the rubble is the first step to rebuilding something real. I left the house that day with more than the truth. I left with a decision. For years I had dreamed of hearing the words my mother finally said, that she knew that she saw the unfairness. But hearing them didn't erase the damage, it just named it, and naming it was only the beginning. I drove straight to a park near the river and called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Can we meet? I asked. There's something important we need to talk about. That evening, as the sky turned gold and the water rippled in quiet rhythm, I told him everything. About the second mortgage, the retirement accounts, the $400,000 that had vanished into another of Logan's failed ventures. And then, I asked the question that had been building inside me since I walked out of that house. Why didn't you tell me you tried to replace my college fund? Daniel looked out over the river, his jaw tense. Because your father told me to stay out of it, and I knew if I told you it would sound like I was trying to turn you against him. I didn't want to be the reason you split from your family. But they already made that choice, I said. They just never said it out loud. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Ava. I should have tried harder. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger toward him, just understanding. We'd both been caught in the wake of someone else's pride. Then I asked what I really came to ask. If you were me, what would you do now? Daniel paused, thoughtful. I'd help them, he said. But with conditions. Clear boundaries. No more blind trust. If they want your help, they have to change. Not just survive. Transform. That night I started building a plan. Not a rescue. A structure. The following week, I met with a financial advisor who specialized in retirement recovery. I paid for the consultation myself. That was non-negotiable. His assessment was firm, but not hopeless. With significant lifestyle changes, he said, and a strict repayment structure, they can avoid foreclosure. But they'll have to rebuild from the ground up. Exactly what I needed to hear. I returned home that Sunday and called a family meeting. They looked nervous when I laid out my terms. I will help, I said. But it comes with boundaries. They sat in silence. First I continued, this isn't a gift. It's a loan. With documentation. I'll cover your immediate debts, but every dollar will be accounted for. My father bristled. You don't trust us. No, I said. Not when it comes to money. Not anymore. He looked away. Second, I said, turning to Logan, you will get a real job. A salary. A boss. No more entrepreneurial adventures funded by parents who can't afford it. You're done chasing dreams on someone else's dime. He opened his mouth to protest. This isn't punishment, I cut in. It's adulthood. My mother didn't argue. She nodded. And third, I said quietly, we're going to therapy. All of us. Together. That one landed the hardest. I don't need therapy, my father said, voice tight. You do, my mother replied, surprising us both. We all do. For the first time, she stood her ground. And he didn't argue. It took 3 weeks of tension avoidance and one very long silence before Logan finally accepted a marketing assistant position at a local firm. He hated it. The hours. The accountability. The reality of having to report to someone. But he went. And slowly I started seeing something shift. Meanwhile, our weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Felton began peeling back years of resentment. My father spoke little at first, but when he finally did, it broke something open. I didn't want you to feel what I felt growing up, he admitted. Always second to Daniel. Always overlooked. I thought if I protected Logan from that, he'd be okay. You didn't protect him, I said. You shielded him from growth. And you left me alone. He didn't deny it. My mother cried more than once. And for the first time, she apologized not for what she said, but for what she hadn't. For the silence. For the complicit smiles. For the years of pretending the imbalance wasn't real. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for a family like ours, that was a revolution. Have you ever had to set boundaries with people you love just to survive? It's not easy, but sometimes boundaries are the only doorway to healing. And this was the first time in my life I wasn't trying to be saved. I was leading the rescue with both eyes open. Healing, I've learned, doesn't arrive with a single conversation. It shows up slowly, like light creeping in under a closed door. At first you hardly notice it. Then one day you look up, and the whole room is different. After setting my terms, things didn't magically get better, but they began to move. Logan started showing up to his job. At first, it was begrudgingly slouched shoulders, constant complaints, long texts about how corporate life is soul-sucking. But something changed around month 2. He got his first paycheck. Earned, not borrowed, not gifted, not salvaged. And something about holding a check that wasn't tethered to guilt or expectation lit a quiet pride in him. He didn't say it, but I saw it in the way he talked about work. How did he stay late? How he stopped dodging calls from clients. 6 months in, he got promoted. Nothing dramatic, just a move to junior account manager. But the look on his face when he told me that was new, not smug, not performative, just grounded. At one of our new monthly sibling dinners, an idea I started unsure he'd even show up. He looked at me across the table and said, "It's weird. Earning something feels better even if it's smaller." And I smiled, because I knew exactly what he meant. Meanwhile, the therapy sessions with Dr. Felton continued. Some weeks were harder than others. There were regressions, silences, flashes of the old family patterns. But gradually, we started having real conversations. My father, who had once only spoken in instructions and judgments, began asking questions. Simple ones at first, then deeper. During one session, he said quietly, "I never realized how much I dismissed your voice, Ava. I thought I was preparing you for the world. I didn't see I was pushing you out of it. It didn't undo everything. But it mattered." He sold his car. Not because I asked him to, but because he said it didn't make sense anymore. He took on part-time consulting work, and to everyone's shock, started reading about emotional intelligence. My mother went back to teaching piano. Not for pride, but because she wanted to contribute to rebuild something tangible. She began texting me simple things, at first recipes articles, questions about design. No mention of Logan, just me. It felt unfamiliar and quietly precious. Then came the moment I didn't see coming. Daniel and my father, after years of silence, shared a table again. It started with an invitation, a cautious lunch meeting at Horizon Works. Daniel showed my father around the office, let him ask questions, treated him not as a rival, but as a brother. It wasn't warm, not yet, but it wasn't hostile either. It was human. And that I realized was the whole point. We weren't aiming for perfect. We were learning to be present, to be honest, to be accountable. As for me, my role at Horizon Works continued to grow. After the healthcare rebrand I helped lead received regional recognition, Lauren called me into her office. "You've earned this," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. It was an offer for a full-time promotion senior designer. With it came real benefits, a clear growth path, and a number on the salary line that made me pause. I blinked, twice, then accepted. That night I celebrated not with champagne, but with something quieter, fresh flowers for my new apartment, a playlist of old favorite songs, and a walk around my neighborhood that didn't feel like survival anymore. It felt like life. Later I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and thought about where I'd been 1 year earlier, delivering pizzas in the rain, invisible, unheard, exhausted. And now I wasn't just seen. I was respected. Not because someone gave me a shortcut, but because I chose the longer road and walked every step of it. Have you ever looked around and realized quietly, gently, that you're no longer in survival mode? That you're finally fully living? That was me. And the best part, I wasn't done yet. Thanksgiving came exactly 1 year after I stood soaking wet on that cobblestone driveway, balancing pizzas and feeling like the world had forgotten me. This time, the dinner was different. It wasn't extravagant. No formal table settings, no speeches about Logan's business ventures. Just a simple meal. And a family trying imperfectly, but sincerely to be whole again. Logan arrived with his girlfriend Melissa. My mother wore an apron and flour on her cheeks. My father greeted Daniel with a handshake that lingered just long enough. There was still tension, still history, but also progress. After the meal, my father cleared his throat. He looked around the room at the faces he had once divided without even knowing. "I'd like to say something," he said. His voice wasn't grand or polished. It was quiet, earnest. "This past year, we've lost a lot. Security, comfort, pride." He glanced at me. "But we've gained something better. Honesty, accountability, and a second chance to be a different kind of family." He looked down, then up again. "Ava, I owe you an apology. Not just for what I failed to give you, but for all the times I made you feel like you had to earn your place." He didn't cry, but his voice broke, and I felt something inside me loosen finally. That night I stayed behind to help my mom with the dishes. She handed me a mug of tea and said, "You've changed us, Ava, all of us, by refusing to disappear." A few weeks later, Daniel pulled me aside at the office. "We're launching a mentorship program," he said, "for students who never thought they'd belong in a place like this." He looked at me. "Would you lead it?" I said yes, without hesitation. And that's how 1 month later, I found myself sitting across from a nervous intern, wide-eyed, unsure exactly where I had been not long ago. "I don't think I belong here," she whispered. I smiled gently. I said the same thing once I told her. But belonging isn't about being ready. It's about being willing to show up, ask the questions, do the work. And I saw something flicker in her, something I recognized. Because maybe that's the real gift of healing. When you stop carrying your scars like shame and start offering them as maps. Have you ever felt like the underdog in your own story? I have. But I've also learned this. Sometimes the people given the least, they are the ones who rise the highest, not in spite of the struggle, but because of it. Thank you for listening to my story. If it spoke to something in you, leave a comment below, because your voice matters here, and your comeback might be closer than you think. Sometimes the hardest thing in life isn't surviving what we've been through, it's learning to believe that we deserve more than just survival. For years, I thought being overlooked was the price of being the strong one, the one who stayed quiet, who never asked for too much. But strength isn't silence, and love isn't real if it only shows up for one child in the family. What changed my life wasn't luck or revenge. It was a quiet decision to stop accepting less and start building something of my own on my terms with my values, and without waiting for anyone's permission. If you've ever felt like the underdog in your own story, or found yourself working twice as hard just to be noticed, I want you to know you're not alone. And you are not invisible. You don't have to prove your worth to people who choose not to see it. Sometimes healing begins the moment you say, "That's enough," and mean it. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family just to protect your peace? Or did you find the courage to stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable? Share your experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more real stories about rising, rebuilding, and reclaiming your voice. Because here, your story matters too.